And I decided to steer away from all controversies. There were a lot of controversies in the news, in social media regarding his missing bulletproof jacket, events trying to connect some kind of controversy with the whole terror attacks. But I decided I don't want any controversy. I want to introduce him at a personal level.
Welcome, Jui, to Pashchim Litcast. Jui is a very beautiful Marathi name. And I think Juhi is what we call it in Hindi, right?
Yes, you're right. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm so happy to be a part of this project, unique project.
Zui, you are based in Boston, right?
Yes, I'm based in Boston.
So first of all, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We're very grateful for this time, especially when we come to November and the end of November, we're very close to the day 26 11. This is a time when many of us are getting ready to enjoy Thanksgiving. So these dates have a different significance for you. So this opportunity to know your father, Hemant Karkare ji, beyond being that person who was a chief of anti-terrorist squad in Mumbai, beyond a Ashok Chakra awardee, that person is also a father, as a person who has inspired many people in his life through his work, but also a person who, just like all of us, came from a middle class background and probably would have had a very luxurious and comfortable life through his work, but took different decisions. So today we would like to know more about him as a person through your book, which you as a first time author wrote, and gave us a window into his life. So I would like to introduce you as a first time author of a book, a memoir of a daughter, honoring Hemant Karkare ji. So how did you and why did you decide to start your writing career, or start to write this book on your father?
So when I was approached by several book authors and companies in Mumbai because they wanted to write a book about my father after the 26/11 terrorist attacks in Mumbai, in which my father was martyred. I I consulted with my family and I decided that I would write the book myself. I come from a software engineering background, but throughout my childhood, me and my family, we've always discussed books in different languages, English, Marathi. We've read books together. We've written book reviews, and I enjoy writing as a hobby. So I thought that this would be something very close to my heart, and rather than giving someone else this opportunity to write the book, I thought I should write it, and it was a form of catharsis for me, dealing with the emotions, and it has. I'm very proud of my father for his sacrifice and that he was martyred. He was honored with the Ashok Chakra, but at the same time, this is such a personal tragedy for not just for the Karkare family, but also for the police force who lost one of their jewels in their crown. So, to deal with this tragedy at a personal level, I thought the book would be the most constructive way to go forward.
Um, when my father passed away, I went through the similar process. I started writing about him and tried to collect his work, tried to talk to a lot of relatives and people that had worked with him to understand him beyond what I knew, beyond my understanding. However, it was easier for me because he was not a public person like Hemantji. So, how difficult was it to navigate yourself through this? And because there is he has a public persona, there is a story about him of connected to Mumbai terrorist attacks, but there are so many other bravery stories connected to him, his work in Austria, then the work that he did in Excel areas, his work also in cracking the case of hijacking of the airplane previous to that. So there is so much of work that he has done through his police service. But then there are so many personal anecdotes that only you saw him, or as a family you have seen him. How did you navigate? Because when there's an ocean to collect, how do you collect it all, and how do you say, okay, these are the areas that I'm going to focus on? How did you navigate yourself through this writing process, and how did you decide which direction to take?
Yes, that's a very good question. So initially, when I started writing this book, the first chapter was written more than 10 years ago, and that time the emotions were raw. So with time, you start looking at the whole process with some perspective, which only time, as the greatest healer, can give. And I decided to steer away from all controversies. There were a lot of controversies in the news, in social media regarding his missing bulletproof jacket, and um, there were always some news uh, events trying to connect some kind of controversy with the whole terror attacks. But I decided I don't want any controversy. I want to introduce him at a personal level. He had so many qualities, not just as a police officer, which was the public side of him, but he loved to make beautiful objects from wood. So he was an artist. He loved to read. We had a personal library in Chandrapur when Papa decided that we should catalog all the books. So just like a library, he cataloged them.
Oh,
So his love for all these other things, I wanted to introduce them because everyone can learn something from each of these things, like how
true.
he was systematic, how he learned English because he studied in a Marathi medium school,
Right.
but he started writing a diary in which he wrote book reviews in English. Then he started describing his friends and how he described their qualities with some English adjectives. So
Okay.
how he went about various ways, I thought this is very motivating for anybody. So I just
Very true.
focused on these aspects.
Okay. You talked about his love for literature. So, who were some of his favorite writers, and is there a book that comes to your mind that he loved talking about?
One of his favorite writers in Marathi was Pula Deshpande.
Right.
He's a world famous humorist,
Yes.
and my
Satire.
yeah,
Satire. Yeah.
yeah, and his Marathi audio cassette, something which I listen to even now.
Right.
So and English, he liked Somerset Maugham. We had a collection of Somerset Maugham at home. He liked P.G. Wodehouse.
Okay.
So those were some of the things we read together. And he had some leather bound classics in his personal library.
Library.
And so we used to read, like I read George Orwell, 1984, and Animal Farm. I was 13 or 14, and I said, "Oh, I like Animal Farm." He said, "Do you know what it is?" I said, "It's a satire." He said, "But do you even know what is a satire? Can you explain?" So, so he encouraged that discussion at home.
Okay.
So those were some of the books we enjoyed together.
Okay. I had read somewhere that during his years fighting against Naxals, uh, when all the family had moved to Chandrapur, and despite having received so many threats, somehow at home he was able to compartmentalize that side, and then still keep an environment of fun and creativity and inquisitiveness in the kids. Um, Tell us a little bit more about that. When you look back at that, what do you see, and what were some of the was there a quality that you kind of later, or maybe at that time, also inspired you, that how he was able to do that?
Yes. Now I find it very inspiring now that I'm a working mother with kids. Sometimes I feel exhausted, and there is no reason to. It's a normal job, normal lifestyle. But now I am so inspired by my father's example. There were no working hours as a policeman who took his job very seriously. He was on call, you can say 24/7. but he did compartmentalize. I can never remember him looking stressed or looking unhappy. He was always very positive and upbeat. He took an interest in the smallest of things, like even the cakes which he used to order for me and my sister's birthday party, the decorations. He paid personal attention to all these minute details, even the interior decoration at home. He liked to he had a keen eye for detail, so he liked to rearrange furniture every time we moved, decide which paint color goes well for which room. And
Okay.
so I find that very fascinating that he had so many interests and such a demanding career, but he was able to also always look fresh and always be upbeat.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
certainly some of that credit I would give my mother for being a very supportive spouse. So
Right.
definitely he could uh, he could focus on his career and his interests.
Right. Your mother was a teacher, right? And
Yes,
she was a poet as well.
yes,
So talk to us a little bit about her. I had read that that your father, after knowing that she writes such beautiful poetry, changed her name to Kavita.
yes.
Talk to us a little bit about her, and if you have a poem that she has written, we would definitely love to hear that and share that with the people who listen to our podcast.
Yes. So my mother's maiden name was Josna Dev,
Okay.
and as was the tradition at that time, my father had a choice to change her name, and because of he was so impressed and so much in love with her beautiful poetry, he changed her name to Kavita, which means poetry in both Marathi and Hindi. And I can recite this poem which Mummy wrote for Papa after he was martyred,
Okay.
and this is something I remember both of them by, so I
Okay.
can say that recite that poetry.
Okay. Sure.
एक एक तारा निखळला आणि निखळताना अधिकच शुभ्र झाला. स्वतःच्या स्वप्नाची रांगोळी झाल्यावर कोणी दुसऱ्याच्या दारी एक सुंदर रांगोळी काढून जातं. असं सपनात सोड, वास्तव्यात कधी होतं. So this is a short poem which my mother wrote
This is
in
beautiful.
honor of my father.
Beautiful. If you don't mind translating roughly to it, I mean, I understood it's about service and people who give their life to others in a beautiful way. But if you can just translate a little bit, that would be helpful.
Yes. So she talks about Nikhalta Tara, which you can translate into a falling star in English. Um, so the falling star, in this case, in Marathi it says becomes even brighter when it falls, and in English, the way I would loosely translate it, after the falling star loses its own brightness, this unique falling star draws a rangoli, which is a beautiful design at
Wow.
somebody else's doorstep. So
Beautiful.
although he
Beautiful.
lost his own
Yeah.
life, he
Yeah. Yeah.
was
Beautiful.
martyred for the nation. So that was something she wanted to underline.
Right. So how have your parents, because they're both in different ways, in fields of service and giving and educating. Your father was more of protection, and he did so much of work as an intelligence officer as well. So does it in when you look back at his life, um, do you we talk about James Bond, we talk about so many spy related content, and we look at them as people who inspire us, we look at them as heroes, but sometimes these heroes are within our families, right? You have a hero in your family as well. Does this fascinate you, different aspects of your parents lives that you may not have known? How do you look at that?
Yes, that's a very good question. So when my daughter, she came from school holding a picture of Martin Luther King's granddaughter, and the granddaughter had a placard saying, "My grandfather was a hero." And my daughter was only 8 or 9. So I told her that, "Do you know that your grandfather was also a hero?" So she didn't know. Obviously, she was only 8 years old. But I showed her some of the things, like I showed her my father's red diplomatic passport, which I still have. So I said he had a special passport because he was doing service for India in a foreign country. So he was a diplomat. And now they are aware. I have the Ashok Chakra, not the original, but my mother had enlarged the Ashok Chakra and I have it laminated. I have a copy of the Ashok Chakra hanging in the on the wall of my living room. I have all the wooden artwork which he did. I still have a lot of those wooden pieces in my visits to India. I started bringing few of those. So those are some of the things which I can share, which are tangible, which my children can touch and feel, and that is how I would like them to slowly imbibe the message of
Right, right,
knowing their grandfather, whom they unfortunately never met.
right, right. Um, I always wonder about the families that died in 9/11, and I think about them, and I think about families that died on 26/11, because I 26/11 and 9/11, I've seen both happening. Um, how does, and I mean, this is more from the mental health perspective, I'm asking you this question. How do you protect yourself from drowning in the grief of loss? What steps can one take? And what have you done to do that?
So to answer that question, honestly, for me, I was a little bit protected because I just came back to Boston. I was in a different country, different environment, and I would say that I had my children. My children were born later, but I had my husband. I would say my brother, who was only 17 at that time, it was very hard for him to deal with this, and I feel that has created an impact uh, which nothing can bring back my father, and some things they just cannot be loss cannot be healed, but you have to accept it and just live with it.
Has writing helped you? Did it bring any kind of catharsis? How what did you discover as you were writing?
Yes, for me the writing process was very helpful. It was a huge catharsis for me, and while I wrote the book I realized that his message was very simple. He was born into not a very privileged family, he but how did he make use of what opportunities came to him, and those diaries which he wrote at 21, 22, I read through them. I have put some of those pages from that diary in this book so that message can reach a wider audience. I learned about how we all have opportunities, we all have our chances, but what do we do with them? For example, my father, he's a mechanical engineer by training.
I think in
He joined a
Nagpur he did engineering, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely right. He was from Nagpur and he joined the corporate world as an engineer. After working for a couple of years, he realized that he wanted to do something which would have a great impact on society. And that's why he decided to write the UPSC, because that is one career which gives you the opportunity to do social work.
Okay. Okay. All right. Where is this book available? And I know it's in Marathi as well as in Hindi, English. So where is this book available? And if you have book with you, can you just show it for our viewers?
Of course. So this is the Marathi book,
Okay.
and it is Marathi book is available online. So it is published by Sadhna Prakashan.
Okay.
So you can order it from Sadhna Prakashan. And the English book, it is available on Amazon. It is available in a Kindle version as well. And then you can also order the book online here in the US. But in India, if you visit any crossword bookstore, they have
Okay.
copies of the hard copies of the book,
Okay.
because the English book was published by Crossword.
Okay. Zui, I do want to go to that day because we all came to know about the tragedy. We all, see it playing out for a few days on TV. I wanted to know that how did you come to know, and how did it all play out for you, and what were the things that happened afterwards?
Yes. So I was in Boston when the incident happened, and I immediately went to India with my husband. And in India, I was shocked. There was a red alert at Mumbai airport. That's why I could not even go immediately as soon as I heard the incident. My first instinct was to just go to the Boston airport, get on the first flight available, but I had to spend a whole night in Boston because of the red alert at Mumbai airport because of the ongoing terror attacks, and I was shocked. It was a personal tragedy. I wept for the city of Mumbai because I was born in Mumbai. I've spent a lot of time in Mumbai, one of the cities that is closest to my heart. And the media, obviously, they showed all the images of all the terror attacks very vividly. So I was very shocked, hurt, and in in the middle of all these this chaotic situation, my husband got a call that uh, the government, they had sent two tickets, for one for me and for my husband, to go back to India. And I was like, even after he is no more, Papa is still taking care of us. So that was a very touching moment for me.
Yeah.
And when I went to India, I realized that I, my mother, she was handling it very bravely. She said everyone who is born has to die, but this kind of a death where you die for the nation, uh, this is an enviable death. So from her, I got a lot of strength,
Yeah.
and she took on the job of making sure that all the police families who are impacted by this, they get their rightful dues. Because my father was a very senior police member, it is very easy for senior officers and their wives to get the re- compensation or any kind of paperwork done through very easily. But for junior, sometimes they have to jump through a lot of hoops. So my mother, she did not focus on her own sorrow. She decided to help people. So I was able to derive a lot of strength from my mother's example.
I had read that she had even refused to sign and get her pension unless and until some other officers who died that day, who were probably junior, unless they all get it, she had refused to accept pension.
Yes, she took the lead on making sure that all the paperwork, all the dues of all the wives, they get it before she gets any of the dues.
Okay.
So she was very, very. They called her Tai, elder sister. So she was
Kalda.
very much at the lead of all this.
Okay. How what do you want your father's legacy be? How do you want people to remember him? Not just this date and this incident. He's much more than that. So how do you want people to remember him?
I want everyone to remember him as a pillar of support for not just the Karkare family, but also for the police. And I see that, for example, in the Mumbai headquarters, they have named the conference room in the police headquarters in Mumbai as Karkare Kamte conference room. Until recently, a few years ago, it was named after a British officer, and everyone wanted to get rid of the British legacy, and they renamed the conference. So I want him to be seen as a pillar of support for the entire police force, which is also the case in the police training academy at Secunderabad. They have a big photo of Pappa. They enlarged one of his photos, which I used for the book launch, and they have it there. They shared the photos with me because it's a very highly secure area. It's a National Police Training Academy, so I have not shared them with anyone. So I want this legacy to go forward. That he is a very uh, good role model for any upcoming police officer, and also somebody who in his personal life also was a huge pillar of support for the entire family.
Since I have you on here right now, I do want to ask a little bit about. We read about his intelligence work in Austria. So, how old were you? Were you around that time? And did he ever talk about some interesting incidents during his work as an intelligence officer?
Yes, he did. So uh, he could share the bare minimum, but he did. He had as he was a full-time career police officer, but he was on deputation as a diplomat, and he was a member of RAW at that time. So he had to go to Delhi for some training, and he wrote some letters from Delhi. So he did mention that in the training, they had to make sure that how can they disguise themselves, or make sure that if somebody is following them, how to make sure to lose that person without calling too much attention. So those were
Lose the
some of
trail, basically. Lose the
yes.
trail. Right, right.
So those were some of the things he shared, and those letters which he sent from Delhi, I had the letters, and I took a picture of those letters, and I put it in the book. But when I shared the book before it was published with one of his batchmates, they were like, please remove that letter because that letter has the address of the raw
Mm.
uh, accommodation in
High,
Delhi. I
yeah,
had no,
hideouts. Yeah.
yeah, I had no idea that this would, even after so many years, this would have such an impact. So I still have no, not much insight into what he did. But these were some of the things which he shared, because when I asked him, so what are you doing in Delhi for your training? So he said these are some of the things, like how at that time there was no iPhone, so he had some pens in which you can press it and you can record. So he had some of these little gadgets. So he showed me. I really don't know whether he used it or because I was 14 years old, he wanted to show me, oh, I have this cool thing. But he couldn't share much.
It sounds very cool, actually. When you think
Yeah, it
about
does.
it.
Yeah. But again, I was in my ninth grade, so those were the things at my level which he could share. Maybe
Yeah,
there's a lot more
more to
that
that.
goes into it.
Yeah. So, are the families of the police officers in touch, like with Mrs. Kamte and other people? Are you in touch, and like, do you guys meet often, or do you guys talk about your journeys, and how does all of that come together?
Yes, we are in touch. I'm in touch with Mrs. Kamte. We talk not regularly, but yes, at least around this time we connect with each other. We and at least a couple of times a year we do call, because I'm in Boston and the other families they are in India. It is hard to meet them because when I go to India, there are obviously other family commitments. But uh, I've tried to be in touch with them as much as possible.
Okay. Are you planning to write another book? What are your other writing aspirations? What are you thinking of doing now next?
So I'm planning to go back to writing blogs. So I have written a few blogs, like mostly book reviews or some. I like traveling, so any interesting incidents from my travel. So I started writing these blogs and book reviews. My brother, who is also a writer, he said that you cannot just wake up one day and write a book. You have to start like warming up. You have to write small articles. So I plan to go back to that, writing book reviews. I miss that uh, writing part.
Yeah, because sometimes book reviews are good writing exercise as well. So,
Yes,
mm.
yeah, yeah. But I don't
So
have any book uh,
what
project in mind.
what books have you reviewed? Like, is there something that you can talk about today?
Yes, of course, yes. So I like historical non-fiction, but I also like fictionalized accounts. Like there is this very interesting book called Laika. It is about a dog that was put into space by the Russians, and at that time they knew that they did not have any way to get the dog back. But the whole process of the space mission, and this was during the Cold War times, and I'm a dog lover myself, so I could relate to that book, how they selected the dog. And it's a graphic novel, so you can see those different panels of how the dog was selected. It was a street dog, very hardy, who could survive such a mission, very intelligent. And then how the book matures, and then the trainer forms such a personal connection with the dog, but they know that this dog is
Not
It's
coming
like a
back.
sacrificial animal.
Right.
So things like that, and it's also connected to the Cold War and how the Russian scientists they wanted to beat America in the space race, etc. So all that part of history is covered. So some books like that I've written book reviews in the Marathi Mandal had this magazine, so I used to send them book reviews
Okay.
every quarter.
Okay. Okay. Are you do you read what are you reading these days, or are there poets or Indian or Marathi writers that you like to read?
Yes, just yesterday I read Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I had heard about that book, but I had never read it.
Okay.
So now I read only the graphic novels. So I read it in a graphic novel format, but
With the
it was very
illustrations?
touching.
It has
Yeah, it is
illustration.
about,
Okay.
yeah, it was very touching about the British colony in Africa
Okay.
and their treatment. So that's why the name Heart of Darkness.
Okay.
How can humanity be so cruel towards? How can mankind be so cruel? So something I enjoy historical fiction and or non-fiction, but
Okay.
so somehow these days I have very limited patience. I read only graphic novels. I haven't read
Okay. No,
any
I
novel in a
understand.
long time.
Zui, you said that you like these days you don't have much patience for too much of text, so probably illustration and graphics and stories that have those kind of visual medium attached to it is what uh, holds you together through a book or through a story or through a narration or through a storytelling. So these days, there are so many ways and forms that people absorb content, like reels, and even the long form is there, but then there are shorter reels, there are videos, there are documentaries, there are graphic novels, illustrations, and then there are regular books as well. As an avid reader and a writer yourself, what do you think, what kind of content do you think will be there in future that people will adhere to, or do you think that keeping the stories of our heroes alive, like your father Karkare Saab, do you think these mediums will also be useful, um, or will we all be going towards reels and not go towards the books? What do you think? What's your opinion about that?
It is a very insightful question. And first, I wrote the book in English because I studied in an English medium school, so I wrote all my exams, all papers in English. So I was comfortable writing in English, not in Marathi, although it is my mother tongue. I'm comfortable talking in Marathi, but writing. So, but I got the book translated to Marathi, again, wider audience, because my father, his career was in Maharashtra. Marathi Manus, as you can say. So
Right.
the book has to be in Marathi. Now, to reach the modern audience, I sincerely believe, like I myself consume a lot of graphic novels, audio books. So this book has to go into the next level to keep up with the times. And I have not followed up every time, and that's because of me. Every time there is some, now I have come out of it, but before that, every time there is some connection with this 2611, I used to feel very low. I used to think more about the personal tragedy aspect, but now I've reached a point where I can think more about spreading this message of a hero, of a real life hero, modern day hero. That is more important. So and because of this interview, now again I am motivated to make that outreach. A lot of people have followed up with me if I would be interested in contributing material for a documentary or a series, and I have had these conversations. I haven't followed up much. People have reached out to me, but again, I have to also keep the conversation alive. I'm going to do that. So thank you for raising that question. I have a few contacts with whom we are actively discussing movie, series, or maybe even the graphic novel. So I that's some homework for me to do to make sure that this story reaches an even wider audience.
So you feel that different types of different forms of media consumption, you're okay with all of that, and you feel that different people have different perspectives. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes. And thank you for this interview. I had stopped giving interviews, but when I spoke with Sunaina, I was like, this is such a unique project. I want to be a part of it. You know, this kind of a project जो आजकल लोग भूल जाते हैं, you know, how artists or authors, how can because they contribute a lot to the society, and there is minimal monetary compensation for authors or any creatives.
व्हेन कभी-कभी क्या होता है, हम जब किसी के बहुत पास हैं ना, तो उनको अच्छी तरह से देख नहीं सकते इन टोटैलिटी। तो आप डॉटर हैं, लेकिन आप थोड़ा दूर हट के जब देखेंगी तो आपको एक अलग इंसान दिखेंगे, जो आपको
Definitely.
probably in this process you have already seen him in so many other facets of his life, with his colleagues, you know how he was with them. And as you said earlier, that his death is not just the death of a father, but it's also death of a leader. So police
Yes.
academy or Mumbai police also lost a great leader. So there are so many facets, so to remind them again that he's not lost.
Yes.
His What he has done in past, and one small incident that he has taken, a small actions that he has taken throughout his life, a little bit more about his work in Naxal area, because he was not just a police officer. He was also trying to, talk to the locals, try to find out what exactly is the reason they go to this in this direction. So there was that social work aspect too. So if we could expand a little bit of that, create some kind of series, that would be amazing. He deserves that. And the reason we took so much time, and I'm always very cautious about reaching out to people whose his death is a tragedy that all of us have seen.
Yes.
So it gets very difficult, as you said, that the moment we come to end of November, it's that a time of the year, it's difficult for you. But I really applaud you that you have stepped up beyond your this tragedy needed a hero, and you have stepped up to share his life, to share his lessons of what values he had imbibed, and the bravery that bravely he fought, and not in only in that day, in other incidents. One of the things that we did not get to talk today, and I wanted to ask you if you had any insight on his role in solving the hijacking plane that was taken to Afghanistan, and how he found out the people in Mumbai that actually funded it, and he was able to crack the case from that
Yes.
side. That led,
Yes.
so a lot of people do not know about that. Do you have any insight on that incident? Did you ever talk about it?
I heard this from my uncle, so I did not discuss that directly with my father when I was 14 at that time, and he also received an award from President Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji at that time. So Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he was very much involved in finding out where the criminals were. He listened to the recordings of the criminals' conversations who were making the call for when that flight was hijacked. So by analyzing those call recordings, by seeing how do we narrow down the geographical area, when you listen to the call recording, you hear some background noise. So he heard
Mm.
some cows in the background. So he narrowed down. Okay, you have some place in Mumbai where there is a proximity to some farm animals. Which are those
Oh,
places? So then you
oh,
narrow those
wow.
down. So how do you think in terms of narrowing down your target? So those were some of the
Mm.
things which he had shared with my uncle, and he was able to successfully find out where those men were hidden in Mumbai, and
Wonderful.
which is not an easy matter. Mumbai is huge. You finding a needle in a haystack, but he was
Yeah.
able to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, it's a city of sounds too. So how do you identify that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's wonderful to know about that as well. But thank you so much for giving us your time. And as we discussed earlier, next year we hopefully will talk to you again. And at that time, it will be about the Hindi translation of this book, or an animation version of Hemant ji's character, his life. And we thank you, your family, your siblings, and the families of other people who gave their life that day. Thank you so much, Joey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to be on this interview, and thank you. And we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you.